Hello and welcome to Zip-Tied. This is my 1970 Porsche 914. I've been building this car from the ground up to be a super badass time attack car. We're also now in crunch time for SEMA. August 15th is my goal to make an entry for SEMA Young Guns. So there's a lot going on, tons of fiberglass work, and I also have two big announcements coming at the end of this episode. So stay tuned and let's get into it.
Starting with the pop-up lights. And it's pretty obvious that the gaps here are terrible. So I'm going to build up some fiberglass around it to fill in those gaps. To do that, I'm going to use poster board as my mold to build upon. Resin won't stick to the poster board, so it's an invaluable material to use in molds. A hot glue gun is perfect to temporarily glue it to the nose, and it allows me to finally begin my career in life hacks. Now if I can figure out how to turn my welder into a stick welder, I'll be unstoppable. A batch of polyester resin is mixed up and a few layers of woven are laid down. After the resin had cured, and despite using no wax, it popped right off. I added 2 more layers of chop strand mat to the back, and this was done to build up a little bit more extra strength. Fiberglass is relatively transparent, so a flashlight shown from underneath is enough to rough in my initial cuts. Last episode, I introduced my composite doors. They don't have latches in them, so they couldn't actually close. So I grabbed the latches and handles out of my old doors and some measurements to mount them up. One of the doors didn't have enough meat to mount one of the handles, so I built up a thick layer of glass to add more material to bolt to. I made a template of the bolt holes out of cardboard. The template was dead nuts because the drill bit went straight through the bolt hole and almost through my finger. And just because it was there, I took all the stickers off the doors so that way they're ready to paint prep whenever the time comes. Next up, I'm going to begin the process of building a set of front wheel wells for this car. And the pinch weld in front of the door is in the way of a smooth evacuation of air at the back. So the idea here is to cut it off, weld it up, and then grind it smooth, that way the fiberglass can run right across it. Welding the pinch weld back up was aggravating to say the least. Another job before I can make the tubs is to make tire clearance at the top of the wheel travel, because currently, there is none. I did my best to mark up the fender where the tire touches, not only with the wheel straight, but turned. The marks ended up looking a lot like a pencil sharpened on both ends. But no matter what it looked like, I really didn't want to make these cuts, but I don't really have a choice, so here goes nothing. My initial cuts were only the start, so with more marks, I made more cuts. I kept the tire pretty close for honestly no good reason, but I was pretty careful. Filling up the new holes introduced me to my new favorite tool, two-part foam. This stuff is mixed in equal parts and expands with very few gaps and air bubbles, unlike spray gap filler. If you wait a second after you mix them, it sets up a little bit and it's a lot easier to stick onto uneven surfaces. Once it's cured, it's as easy as any foam to trim and sand. And since I had the foam out, I decided it was a good time to fill the voids in the spoiler I cut previously for the wing mounts. Once everything was cured and nicely sanded, I gave it a layer of painter's tape to seal off the foam. The tape received a coat of wax because, unlike shipping tape, resin will bond to it. These layers of fiberglass will act as molds for the layer of fiberglass I'm going to apply underneath it. Before I popped it off, I gave it some alignment lines so I lined it back up after. I hot glued the molds on, but as you will see soon enough, that was not a great idea. Once I started to dab the resin into the chop strand mat, the hot glue began to come off of the nose. I knew it was just a Hail Mary, but I tried to drill through the fiberglass I just laid. It was a terrible idea. The better solution was to rivet them on so I can really manhandle them. If the nose hadn't been so flexible in this spot, I bet it wouldn't have been such a problem. With the molds off and the resin cured, you can see just how much clearance I gained. Some Bondo on top and these things will be perfect. Before I can start laying out my wheel tubs, I have a few more things to do. I knocked off all my nice suspension components to give me more space to work with. I left the control arms on so I don't have to cut holes for them later. I also need to have the splitter in place as well so I can seal the wheel tubs up to them. Now is also a good time to address the fact I haven't cut holes in the nose for the support cables. Without them, the splitter may hang too low to accurately seal. I set the nose on so I can make an outline of the leading edge out of tape. That way, when I hook the cables up with the nose off, I can measure their height and an angle they will pass through the nose. Now that I have measurements of each cable, I can just transfer it onto the nose and drill holes. These cables look fantastic coming out of the nose. I do have a plan to actually hook them up with everything attached, but I haven't made them yet. I'm sure it will be fine. Okay, one last thing before I make the wheel wells. There's a series of gaps and holes along the nose and around my new fiberglass bits. Standard body filler would crack over time in these areas, so instead I have fiberglass reinforced filler. It's basically just liquid fiberglass, but it looks more like liquid rats. I gave the nose a treatment of 80 grit sandpaper so the filler would bond. I globbed on the filler because you know what they say, the bigger the glob, the better the job. It looks hideous now, but it's ready for sanding once the car is in bodywork. Okay, so it's finally time to build the wheel wells, and in order to build a mold for it, I need to mimic some things that don't exist yet so I have a place to attach tape to. Angle aluminum cleat-coated and hot glued on is good enough to be a floor, and a 3-inch piece of tube was zip tied on as well to give room for the coolant hoses to pass through. Then it's just a matter of using a lifetime supply of tape. Poster board slid on one side only allows it to curve. I made 2 of these and then taped them at the backs of the wheel wells to give them a small curve for evacuating air out. I again gave the tape a coat of wax, but I also gave it a coat of PVA release film on top of that. That way there's something for the resin to grab onto when laid upside down. I plan on 2 to 3 layers of glass on the tubs. The first will be woven so it conforms better to the molds, followed by layers of chop strand for added thickness. I sprayed the tub with composite adhesive so I could lay up the fiberglass before adding resin. The woven layer wetted easily and quickly, but when it was time for the chop strand mat, my whole tone changed. Wetting this much glass in 10 to 12 minutes was incredibly difficult, not to mention laying up fiberglass above your head is completely miserable.
Alright, so I've learned some things. When working with such a big surface area like these wheel wells, the 10 to 12 minute work time you get with polyester resin is not very long. I need to figure out how to slow down that chemical reaction that actually hardens that resin. So the first thing I'm doing is temperature regulation. Polyester resin works on a chemical reaction when you mix the hardener with the resin that heats up as it hardens. So the lower initial temperature you can start with, the better work time you're gonna have. So that means that the garage right now is frigid. AC is ready to throw a rod. And I put my resin in the fridge, which do that only with unopened cans. But I got the resin down to 45 degrees. So with the initial temperature starting lower, it should grant me longer work times. So the next thing I did was grab a paint tray, and this will help spread the surface area of the resin out a lot more. Because if it's all like in a deep cup, it heats up fast. Then step 3 is use slightly less hardener. Now this may take a little bit of trial and error because you don't want to use so little hardener that it doesn't harden at all. So with all 3 of those things together, I think I can actually increase the work time significantly and make it so I don't have to work so stupid fast to get the job done. With that said, let's move on to making molds for the rear quarter panels because they need some attention that I have not given them.
The reason I'm making new rear quarters is twofold. One, the panels I have are beat up. Second, they really need to be about a ½ inch wider for adequate tire clearance. To deal with number 2, I shoved a ½ inch of spacer between the tire and the fender to force the fender out. If I do this and then make a mold of it, the new fender will have extra clearance in its relaxed state. The fender gets temporarily riveted on with some countersunk rivets so they don't sit proud into the mold. An extension is needed on the bottom of the fender so it lines up with the bottom of the not yet made side skirt and floor. So I guess really there's 3 reasons I can't use these fenders. I once again hot glued on some poster board to the bottom of the fender, but added tabs to the back so it would line up flush. Alright, maybe there were 4 reasons. The door handle pockets also didn't line up like at all. Some expanding foam and tape are also good enough here. Modeling clay helped keep the Bondo in the bucket while still letting me to tune up the gaps and repair broken bits of the fender. You don't need to let the clay harden because it won't stick to the fiberglass with a layer of wax and PVA. To make good large molds like this, you need 4 to 8 layers. You can get away with lower end of that by adding in some bracing, but I didn't do that. I basically just added glass till I was sick of adding resin. So I have good news, all of my added measures to extend the work time of the resin absolutely worked. I got about 20 or so minutes out of this resin instead of the typical 10 to 12. To keep the resin cool, in between layups I would put the resin bucket into a cooler with water and ice. Thankfully, once the resin cured, the mold popped off relatively easily, and while the clay came with the molds, it wipes off easily too.
Okay, so these molds came out really good. Normally, you'd want to use maybe 4 to 8 layers of that chop strand mat to build up a bunch of strength for these, but considering I'm only planning to pull 1 quarter panel out of each of these, I really don't think it's gonna be that big a difference. Additionally, I can keep the molds like in the shed or something like that if I ever have a tire blow out and take the quarter panel off. In summary, I think the work in this episode came out really sick. I really love the cables on the front splitter. The tire clearance, mint. Absolutely mint. Front wheel wells, also super mint. And also just the fact that the doors open and close, or they did before I covered them in fiberglass in the front. So the 2 big announcements. First is color, and I am very excited about this. This is kind of like Signal Orange, which is a stock color to this car, except for it's way fancier. This is Tangelo Pearl. It's a pearl orange, so it's got nice like white flakes in it. It's not metal flake, but it's a lot subtler. It doesn't look like a bass boat, which I like. It also has a little bit different of like color changing property in different lights, so it's a lot fancier of an orange, and it just punches up the look of this build. Announcement number 2, I have found a sponsor and I have submitted my application for SEMA. I don't know if I should say who the sponsor is yet, so I'm gonna let that work itself out in time. And I haven't been officially accepted into SEMA, but we're about there. Coming up, what we got is the last couple things to do before bodywork, and then bodywork in the next episode. I'm itching to do bodywork in a literal sense because fiberglass sucks. So if you don't want to miss how this car turns out, make sure you subscribe, do the thing, because this thing is gonna be sick. We're going to SEMA, I think, and I'm just excited. I'll see you next time.